the only Jett James Priutt. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Welcome to Careology, the science of caring. Our wonderful show creator Roxy is off tonight, so this is your guest host, Jett James Priutt, ready for a fantastic discussion this evening. Tonight's topic is Teen Talks, how to spread empathy throughout your community, the nation, and the entire world. We're going to touch upon a number of interesting issues, both domestic and international, but first a little bit about the show and its mission. To begin with, the Careology radio show is a wholly owned subsidiary of the 501c3 nonprofit organization CareBag. CareBag's mission is simple: to provide access to proper hygiene to those in need by spreading wellness throughout the community. Rated a platinum level charity by GuideStar, CareBag is an all-volunteer-driven organization that fills the gaps not covered by federal assistance by providing feminine products, baby diapers, adult diapers, soap, razors, shampoo, wipes, and other vital hygiene items through their mobile shower units, mobile hygiene pantry, and their Happy Bottoms project covering bottoms of all ages. Careology is a weekly radio show that shares important information and knowledge with the Treasure Coast about key community services and resources available to all citizens in our great state of Florida. For more information, please be sure to visit www.givecarebag.com. Now, a little bit about me. Again, my name is Jett James Priutt. I am a 16-year-old Pulitzer Prize-nominated author of the best-selling political book, Through the Eyes of a Young American. I also serve as founder and editor-in-chief of the political news website, thegenzpost.com, which was launched 2 years ago on this very day, and president of my 10th grade class at Florida Virtual High School. In addition, I also serve on the National Youth Advisory Board for Harvard University's Making Caring Common project, as well as a volunteer producer for Careology and a government affairs liaison here at CareBag. So, let's dive right into tonight's topic. What is empathy exactly? We usually hear the term thrown around a lot in everyday language, but we don't really take the time to reflect on what it means and what it really means as a component of daily life. Famous author John Steinbeck once said, "You can only understand people if you feel them in yourself." Well, I think this is probably the best way to describe empathy. Often, people confuse the concept of sympathy with that of empathy. So this begs the question, Cliff, what do you think the difference is between empathy and sympathy is? What are some of your thoughts?
Well, I know that the empathy is often mistaken for a hypochondriac because they seem to feel everything that everybody else feels, including illness, and that's probably the most noticeable thing when it comes to empathy is when it's illness. Somebody else is actually feeling that with somebody who's experiencing that. That's empathy. You're feeling what they're feeling. Now, sympathy is a little bit different. That's when you can, I'm with you, I feel you. You can sort of associate with what they're going through and sympathize with them. Empathy is a little bit different. It's kind of a specialized type of thing because, it gets mistaken for hypochondriac more often than it should. And so we just have to be careful. Don't be so quick to judge somebody that you think's a hypochondriac. They might be an empath. Very important people, these empaths, because, well, that's somebody who's with you and can probably help steer the proper vibes to make everything all right, down the road. So we try to empathize as most often as we can because we always want to put ourselves in other people's shoes. But empaths don't have much choice. They're experiencing it anyway. So be cautious in your judgment of these folks. They really mean well. And they do very good. They help. It really does help. As someone who can empathize and kind of have an understanding of what they're going through, well, they can help. There's moral support. There's a bunch of things that's good about that.
That is so true, and that is such an interesting perspective, and I totally agree with you. In fact, so elaborating on what you said, Cliff, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines sympathy as, quote, the feeling that you care about and are sorry about someone else's trouble, grief, misfortune, etc.
Yeah.
And while, of course, this is a noble gesture and can generate a feeling of support,
right.
Empathy is a much more deeper way to connect with somebody and to understand what they're going through, especially through significant emotional pain.
Sharing sorrows. For instance, yes, very, very empathetic.
Yeah, that is definitely true. I mean, that is so true. Empathy. So, as we know, feeling sorry for a person automatically generates feelings of pity, which is not helpful in situations where people are in pain.
Right.
So, empathy becomes the bridge that connects two people together and creates a space for more genuine healing, understanding, kindness, and compassion. What do you think about that?
It's easier to heal if somebody's with you on it. You know, if somebody is empathizing along with you, you're not alone. You're not alone in it. I'm just trying to think of ways to explain how empathy works, because sometimes at some point everybody experiences some kind of empathy. But don't mix it up with sympathy. We're talking about two totally different breeds of animal. Totally different. Sympathy and empathy, two different things. I love the empath part. I like to look into things like that. But hey, so far so good on it. What else we have this week?
Yes, well, in addition to this, by working on our empathy, of course, we establish what empathy is.
Right.
It's understanding internal feelings, understand somebody else's perspective, as you brilliantly described, Cliff. It's definitely something that allows us to relate to people. By working on our empathy, it allows us to hear other points of view and spring us forward into automatically becoming helpful. Now, did you know, Cliff, that more formally, psychologists Paul Ekman and Daniel Goleman argued that empathy has three distinct components. The first part of empathy is cognitive empathy, which is the ability to understand another person's perspective. Emotional empathy is the ability to deeply share another person's pain or happiness almost as if they were our own. The final part of empathy is compassionate empathy, taking action as a result of that emotional understanding, what we typically refer to as kindness. So, to summarize, empathy is the ability to understand and feel the emotional states of others. It enables us to act compassionately towards other people, animals, and all other forms of living creatures. Regardless of age, all humans are dependent on each other for emotional, psychological, and mental well-being. Of course, empathy and sympathy are not feelings that are confined to a specific age group. And as a result, humans are widely considered to be social creatures. We cooperate with each other to bond, survive, and thrive. Touch is vital to human growth. And because we naturally crave the acceptance of others, it is important that we take steps to promote kindness and compassion wherever and whenever we can. So, this begs the essential question. Why is empathy such a hot topic among young people all of a sudden? It's been around throughout the entire existence of the human species, so why is this such a big deal all of a sudden? Because now more than ever, it feels that we are raising a generation with empathy at an all-time low. Some blame technology, while others cite isolationism exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. But either way, it's evident that our ability to emphasize and understand the perspectives of one another have drastically changed from just one decade ago. As the famous Mahatma Gandhi once said, the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. At one time, empathy was believed to be genetically determined. A person was either born with little or no empathy, and that was simply that. A sociopath, for example, famously exhibited no empathy, and we've made dozens of horror movies about this phenomenon. Hollywood has definitely capitalized on that. But now experts believe empathy can be taught by parents, teachers, and society at large. And although this concept can be taught to children as young as 1 year old, the most crucial years of development, according to most psychologists and most members of the scientific community, is between 5 and 7. However, I personally think that this data is outdated. Given our technological advances, I personally believe the most crucial years to develop empathy in young people are between 12 and 16 years old, when teens are in the process of figuring out who they are and how they fit into the world around them. In other words, when they are developing their personality and their purpose. So with that out of the way, what can parents do to foster empathy in their children? According to Forbes magazine, the best ways to accomplish this is to model it at home and show it to others outside the home. Make discussions about your child's feelings a normal, regular part of everyday conversations. Use I feel statements and ask your children to do the same in return. Teach children to put them in the place of those they hurt in any way. Ask your children why it's important the group makes decisions taking everyone's situation into account. So taking the entire group's taking the entire group's benefits into account as well. Now, of course, this makes a lot of sense at home, and it sounds easier said than done, but how does this translate into the real world? One way is to recognize that most people around us are constantly finding ways to meet their needs. Motivational speaker and famous life coach Tony Robbins has a great book, which I highly recommend, discussing this concept called Awaken the Giant Within. But in short, he explains that there are 6 universal human needs that everyone shares: certainty, variety, love and connection, significance, growth, and contribution. These needs can be met in both positive and negative ways. For example, a person who craves significance can become a popular Instagram influencer or a top volunteer at a soup kitchen. On the flip side, if that same person robbed a bank, then he or she would become the most important person to every soul within those bank walls. So evidently, we must find ways to help people feel their needs in positive and productive ways. And frankly, that's where we're failing today as a society. So let's talk about this more in detail. Let's analyze this deeper. Cliff, what do you think are some positive ways that people can create more certainty in their lives?
Well, create fond memories to keep. You want to always create fond memories. Whatever you're out there doing, you want to have fun at it, and so you definitely want to pay enough attention to it to analyze it and study it and crave it. And next thing you know, hey, it's helping out. And if you're desiring to be more empathetic towards others, just watch yourself one of those emotional movies where everything finally turns out right in the end. And what happens? Everybody in the room's blubbering and crying because they've watched this very emotional scene. It's like, that's empathy. You know, you're feeling what somebody, even though it's a portrayal, even though it's actors and actresses, they're portraying all this stuff really good, and you're falling for it, and by golly, you're empathizing with the characters they've created. That's amazing, but it's true. That's what happens.
Great point, and I definitely agree with you. So, emotional certainty. So, like when we watch a film, like as Cliff was explaining, we know that there might be a happy ending at the end of the film. So that's definitely positive, and that's a very important component of society.
And when there is that wonderful happy ending, you watch the emotions. Everybody just falls apart sometimes, and sometimes, yes, it's everybody in the room. Sometimes,
yeah,
there'll be some in the room that say, "Well, I don't want everybody to know that I'm an emotional guy, so I'll just kind of be quiet to myself over here." You know, it'll happen, folks, and I guess it's okay. But, well, if you can successfully empathize with anyone, that's what you need to focus on and try to do more often. Because I think if we gave consideration to how others feel, even if we weren't empathetic, if we could give consideration to how they feel, I think the whole world could be a whole lot better right then, right there. Because we're taking that first step.
Right. No, I agree with you, Cliff. And in addition to emotional certainty, there are a variety of ways that we can establish certainty within our own lives. Setting up routines, developing healthy habits, paying bills on time, getting more organized, cleaning your room, proactively staying on top of things can certainly help alleviate stress and mayhem in your daily life. And concerning variety, so moving on to the next human need, in order to meet variety, you can watch a film that you've never seen before, or visit a restaurant that you've never been to before, or read a book that, if you love historical fiction, I'm currently reading a book called Munich, The Edge of War, about the Munich Agreement of 1938, written by Robert Harris. I'm absolutely enjoying it. I don't usually read historical fiction, but that's just one of the ways that I constantly generate interest and excitement, fulfilling my need for variety. Love and connection. As Cliff was explaining, constantly emphasizing with characters in a movie is one way. Looking after pets, for example. Looking after your loved ones. Connecting with friends from high school that you haven't spoken to in 10 years. These are all ways that you can meet love and connection, which is definitely something that everyone needs. Significance. Somebody can have productive and positive ways in order to meet significance. For example, They could volunteer at a soup kitchen. They can create a radio show. They can write a book, conveying and promoting positive ideas in society. How can one positively meet their needs for growth? Growth, you can read books, you can learn, you could watch documentaries, you can learn about things that you never you've never known it before. You can even go out to a grocery store that you've never been to because you're actually receiving external stimuli that has not previously not been there. And last but not least, how can people meet their needs for contribution? Contribution is definitely another important human need. So, contributing in the realm of being a great parent, or being a great spouse, or being a great student, volunteering, of course, volunteering at a food bank, or volunteering at a local beach cleanup. These are ways in which we can develop positive, healthy habits in order to meet our 6 essential human needs without posing without posing harm to other people in our community. And as a matter of fact, giving back to the community is what CareBag is all about. At this time, please be sure to visit www.givecarebag.com for more information about how to get involved and support your important mission. So, with that being said, how much empathy do you have? We've identified the 6 human needs, so how does empathy play a role in your life? Well, let's find out by taking the empathy quiz. Roll along with me, if you if you will.
Sounds like fun.
Sounds great. So, do you agree or disagree with the following statements? Number 1, I easily feel sad when the people around me feel sad.
Well, yeah. Can't help that, though. But that's empathy, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. 2, before criticizing somebody, I try to imagine how I would feel if I were in his or her place.
Yeah. Always consider the feelings of others before you say anything these days, because you can offend somebody without meaning it real easy.
Number 3, it is difficult for me to understand what makes my friends happy.
If it's difficult for you to figure out how you need a little more empathy there, because with a little empathy, it'll give you clues as to what you need to say to them at the right times. I think that's important, too. Yeah.
Number 4, it upsets me to see someone being treated disrespectfully.
Yeah, we can't stand that, can we? And it happens right in front of us, and we witness this, and it bothers us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Number 5, when someone else is feeling excited, I tend to get excited as well.
Well, sure. Happiness works together better than sadness does. So that's pretty good information there, yeah.
Number 6, I have tender, concerned feelings for people less fortunate than me.
Ah, now that's empathy. People less fortunate, when that steps it up a grade on your part, too. That elevates your level. Okay?
Number 7, I sometimes find it difficult to see things from the other person's point of view. Agree or disagree?
Ooh, find it difficult to see. Now that's the tribalism that Rudy talks about, because some people just won't tolerate somebody else's point of view, and that's kind of silly and very non-empathetic, of course.
Yeah.
Wow.
Number 8, I find that I am in tune with other people's moods.
Ooh. Find yourself fortunate if you discover that. If you're finding yourself in agreement with a lot of people's moods and you're okay with it, maybe there's hope for you after all. Hey, maybe there's hope for all of us. With people like young Jett James Priutt in here at the helm of the future for us, I think we're in pretty good hands.
Thank you, Cliff. I appreciate that. Number 9, if I'm sure I'm right about something, I don't waste much time listening to other people's arguments.
Okay. Yeah, it's worth listening because, after all, if somebody gives you facts, it could change your mind about something, and whether that be political or whatever, it's going to be the facts and nothing but the facts, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, folks. It'll save you, all right?
Number 10, if someone tells me about an event that made him or her happy, I can easily understand why that event made him or her happy.
Okay, yeah, if you can feel like that, that's empathy. That's real good empathy. And if you are getting clues to the reasons you're feeling the way you feel sometimes, listen up, you might be learning something here. That's a wonderful thing about talk radio. We talk, we get things discussed out in the open, and we can make decisions based on the things that we've learned through our discussions.
Good point. Good point. Number 11, I try to look at everyone's side of a disagreement before I make a decision.
Okay. Yeah. That's empathy.
Question 12, I become irritated when someone cries.
Oh, no. You need a little more patience for that empathy. That you need to exercise empathy when that happens, because there's a reason why that somebody's crying, and it'd be quite cold and, very intrusive to impose something on that person because they're crying, because they're sad. That's not right. So, yes, empathy is needed in this case, definitely.
And last but not least, question number 13. When I see that my friend is sad about something, I easily feel sad as well.
Okay, there you go. Yep, you're an empath. You are an empath if that's the case with you, friends. Yeah, pay close attention to the body language of your friends and what they're actually saying to you, and the empathy will do the rest, because you'll kind of get the way they feel. Have you ever? Here's my experience. I remember when I went into the hospital to be there for a couple of days, I noticed that I could feel people, that there were some people there in the hospital that they were dying. They were afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And they were miserable because they knew they were dying and they were afraid. And I could tell that. You could physically hear some people that were having trouble, because, you wake up in the middle of the night in the hospital and there's somebody walking down the halls and there's a security guard, trying to keep everybody calm and everything, because these things happen. People get upset, and if you're tuned in on their frequency when it comes to empathy, it can get pretty confusing. That's why I stated earlier, a lot of empaths are mixed up with people thinking that they're I keep forgetting the term when you think you're sick all the time. Hypochondriac.
Yeah.
Not a hypochondriac, it's an empath. You're not really sick. You feel the symptoms that somebody else feels because you're an empath, not because you're a hypochondriac. Now, there are hypochondriacs, so you can't say that about all of them, but it's not all psychobabble. It's not all. It's just, you have to be able to decipher which is which. And guess what we need to do?
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much, Cliff, for answering these questions. Thank you for playing along. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
As you can see, how you answer those questions to yourself can truly illuminate just how much empathy you really have.
Okay.
And we're going to go to commercial break right now. Next up, how does empathy play a role in the ongoing Ukraine and Russia conflict?
Ooh.
We'll explore this topic in more detail when we return back from a break from one of our sponsors.
If you could reimagine the way you buy a car, what would you do? Make it simple, make negotiations disappear, demand transparency, then experience amazing at your Treasure Coast Lexus dealer. Car Buying Simplified. Treasure Coast Lexus is a proud sponsor of Careology. Every Tuesday at 6:05 p.m., caring and supporting for our community. Car Buying Simplified. Check out your Treasure Coast Lexus dealer. Why call Two Men in a Truck of the Treasure Coast? You want to move your business without moving a single meeting? You want it handled with no fuss. Lots of stuff, no time to move it? You need the pros that care. That's why you call Two Men in a Truck of the Treasure Coast. Family owned and operated franchise. Call 772-236-0827. 772-236-0827. Movers who care. Visit Two Men in a Truck, treasurecoast.com.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
And remember, views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WPSL, but hey, we encourage you in the first place to like and share them on social media and with all your friends and neighbors. Now back to Careology, the science of caring. Your guest host this week is Jett Priutt.
Thank you so much, Cliff. Welcome back to Careology, the science of caring. Again, our wonderful show creator Roxy is off tonight, so this is your guest host, Jett James Priutt. Tonight's topic is Teen Talks, how to spread empathy throughout your community, the nation, and the entire world. Now, before going to break, we asked the question, how empathy is playing a role in the ongoing Russo-Ukrainian conflict. So, in order to fully understand this conflict and what's going on in Ukraine, we have to trace really what the origins of it are. Why has Russia launched an offensive against Ukraine? What does the government in Moscow specifically want? So, to explain the situation, the main reason why President Putin and other leaders in Moscow has launched an invasion against Ukraine is simply because they do not want Ukraine to join NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That is really a core schism between the West and the East. So, for context, NATO was originally established in April 1949 as a Cold War security pact, counterweighing the influence of the Soviet Union. After the USSR was dissolved in 1991, NATO membership has expanded eastward, encompassing numerous former Soviet republics. These nations include Slovenia, Slovakia, Romania, Poland, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Lithuania, Latvia, Hungary, Estonia, Czech Republic, Croatia, Bulgaria, and Albania. Considering that NATO has expanded eastward, President Putin has, over the past several decades, warned Western nations and member of this security alliance to not continuing to expand eastward. And he has also made claims that he personally discussed with American President Bill Clinton about Russia acceding to NATO in the early 2000s. But of course, talks about Russia joining NATO have proven to be futile. Now here we are in 2022, dealing with the product of this ongoing geopolitical conflict. According to Al Jazeera, President Putin said in a televised address just prior to the invasion, quote, "If Ukraine were to join NATO, it would serve as a direct threat to the security of Russia." He also described the Ukraine as a springboard for a NATO strike against Russia. So most international pundits agree that these claims are mostly propaganda, frankly, and that they're simply ludicrous. For over 30 years, since the USSR was dissolved, NATO maintained practical cooperation on issues regarding counter-narcotics, counter-terrorism, submarine rescue, and civil emergency planning with Russia. However, following the latter's annexation of Crimea in 2014, NATO severed diplomatic engagement with Moscow. So here we are. This current conflict is a product of several decades' worth of conflict between NATO and Russia, and the current situation in Ukraine is absolutely mind-blowing to everyone around the world and horrifying. Images of buildings reduced to rubble, men, women, and children being slaughtered by airstrikes and artillery fire. Allegations of chemical weapons use has certainly isolated Russia on the world stage. And as most Americans know, the incursion into Ukraine has certainly has triggered a stark Western response against Russia after the European Union imposed swift international sanctions against the country. Gravely, as of this moment, President Putin has elevated Mr. Alexander Vonikov to take central command of the next phase of battle in Ukraine. He has been called the Butcher of Syria for indiscriminately killing civilians there. Moreover, there are American, British, and Ukrainian officials are investigating claims that Russia could have used chemical weapons while besieging Mariupol within the last few weeks. The production, use, and stockpiling of chemical weapons in warfare is strictly prohibited by the 1997 Chemical Weapons Convention, which Russia signed and ratified.
That's why they don't want NATO.
Yes.
They're in the Ukraine.
As of this, according to the United Nations, more than 4.3 million people have fled Ukraine. The death toll continues to rise, and the humanitarian situation continues to worsen. For this reason, the political fallout from the Russo-Ukrainian war is unrelenting. On Thursday, April 7th, the United Nations General Assembly voted to officially suspend Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. With this in mind, Moscow became the first permanent member of the Security Council to be barred from any UN body. Speaking to the UN Security Council on April 5th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described the massacre as genocide and urged for the creation of a Nuremberg-style tribunal to prosecute Russian officials. Shortly thereafter, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield introduced this resolution to revoke Russia's membership from the Human Rights Council. In short, the Council is tasked with promoting human rights and investigating allegations of human rights abuses around the world in all 193 member states.
You mean like killing civilians instead of military operations? I notice when we attack in a war, we're attacking an operation where the enemy is building weapons, a weapons factory or a weapons outpost. It's always against the other military's operation, but in this case, they're just killing civilians.
Right.
That's the atrocities of war, and that's the war crimes that they're talking about tribunals for. Those kind of crimes, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's why this topic is such an important issue, because it really makes us wonder and reflect. What are we as an international community to witness these crimes and witness this genocide, and how such little empathy is allowing a malign actor to conduct such human atrocities in an unprovoked and illegal war. And mind you, Russia's suspension from the UN Human Rights Council is extremely rare. In fact, Libya was suspended from the council in 2011 due to violence inflicted against protesters by Muammar Gaddafi's government. Of course, aside from this, suspensions from the UNHCR are extremely rare, and it has massive geopolitical consequences. As such, Russia's expulsion from the Human Rights Council begs an essential question. Now, can Russia legally be expelled from the Security Council? I've had a few of my friends ask me, since Russia was suspended from the Human Rights Council, can we just suspend it from the Security Council? And for context, the Security Council produces legally binding resolutions. Unlike General Assembly resolutions, which are deemed non-binding and mostly symbolic, all 193 members of the United Nations have to follow Security Council resolutions. And the Security Council deals with issues regarding peacekeeping operations, economic sanctions, and military action in corners around the globe. So the reason why this is so important, and most listeners should care, is that the UN Security Council is composed of 5 permanent members: Russia, China, France, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Also called the P5, these nations serve alongside 10 rotating members to manage international conflict. So every P5 wields tremendous influence in the Council, possessing the ability to veto any substantive resolution. So to give you an example, if there is a resolution presented to the Security Council, and 14 out of 15 Security Council members vote for a resolution condemning Russia for invading Ukraine, as what happened earlier this year, this resolution can easily be annulled if Russia simply votes against it. However, if 14 out of 15 Security Council members vote for a resolution admonishing Albania, the resolution will still pass if all P5 nations approved it. So, in addition to a supermajority of countries, 9 out of 15 members, all P5 members have to be on board. So in this scenario, Russia has a lot more power than Albania in this scenario. And for this reason, the P5 is a very controversial element of the United Nations, with some arguing that it concentrates too much political power in the hands of only a few nations. So the truth is that Russia cannot be barred from the Security Council, because in order to do so, they would have to be removed from the General Assembly. So in order to be removed from the General Assembly, all 193 member states have to vote on a resolution recommended by the Security Council. And since Russia can easily easily veto any substantive resolution, they can just simply vote against a resolution expelling them from the United Nations. According to Article 6 of the UN Charter, according to Article 6, a member of the United Nations may be expelled from the organization by the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. To further complicate matters, the UN Charter never specified how to remove a P5 from the Security Council. So, therefore, even if Russia is expelled from the General Assembly, one can argue that member states would have to amend the Charter to officially bar the country from the Council. Now, there was actually domestic American legislation that is actually aimed to amending the UN Charter in order to officially remove Russia from the P5. On the same day that President Zelensky delivered his address, 9 Republican senators, including Senators Joni Ernst of Iowa, Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, Kevin Kramer of North Dakota, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi, Rick Scott of Florida, Roger Wicker of Mississippi, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, and Steve Daines of Montana, drafted a resolution urging the UN to amend Article 23 to officially remove Russia from the Security Council. However, even if this resolution passes the U.S. Senate, it will have very little impact on the UN's decision to officially amend its own rules.
We hear a lot about sanctions, though. Are sanctions really effective?
No, I mean, you can argue that, well, many international pundits think that we are actually in an economic war against Russia. Even if we don't have boots on the ground in Ukraine, we've implemented sanctions targeting virtually every single aspect of their economy. And frankly, it doesn't really seem like it's deterring Moscow. I mean, from most people's perspectives, and considering that President Putin has elevated the butcher of Syria to take new central command in Ukraine, it's very concerning about the future developments in the country.
Wow!
And of course, on behalf of everyone, on behalf of the United States, we offer our condolences, our thoughts and prayers to the people of Ukraine. We stand by them, and it's very important to address this issue on a global stage.
Wow.
So how does this topic relate to empathy? Of course, international news is very fascinating, to me at least. But how can people apply this? Well, the simple truth is that Russia isn't really conveying a lot of empathy. Of course, they are trying to confront. They're trying to confront NATO allies, but they're not necessarily accounting for the human catastrophe. And frankly, this is going to breed resentment among the Ukrainian population against Russia for decades and possibly centuries to come. Fortunately, there are positive, and fortunately, this also relates to empathy, because there was a tremendous global phenomenon that is happening as a result of this war. Millions of people across the world, from the United States to Japan to Poland, from all over Europe, are uniting on social media and conveying support for Ukraine. And it is so fascinating how digital technology, social media, and instant methods of communication can provide mediums and platforms for people to really express and to use the ideological currents in order to help a nation in need. And this is arguably why President Zelensky has been able to capture the hearts and minds of millions and billions of people across the globe and win the international community's support.
Weapons are making it into the Ukraine. They're making it there. I mean, remember that 40-mile tank parade that I guess the Ukrainians were waiting for it when it arrived with, I guess, anti-tank weapons. They were blowing those tanks up left and right, and the Russians were suffering great losses. Now, the difference between the Ukraine losses and the Soviet losses are, well, the Ukraine, it's human losses. It's individual citizens being killed. The military, they're doing the best that they can, and these folks over in Ukraine are holding them off very well, very well. So So what's going to happen from here? Are they going to give up? Or are they going to decide to, let's not do this? It's not working out the way we planned. Let's hope for the best in this case there. But
Yeah, that's a really good point, Cliff, and I'm glad you mentioned that because Ukrainians really have a reason to fight. They're defending their homeland. This is their country against a foreign aggressor, and it appears that the morale among the Russian military forces is very low. They're having supply issues, logistical issues. So it's very fascinating to see how the underdog can really stand up for themselves if they have a sole legitimate reason.
we see how they're treating their neighbors in Russia. What's to stop them from attacking us? But the good thing about that is the Ukrainians have showed us some inspiration here. Where the great big USSR is history. It's not there anymore. It's not what it once was. And I think they're realizing it now because you don't go attacking citizens when you're even in the worst war ever. You don't go in and kill the citizens of the country because they're not the enemy. It's the enemy's the enemy. The military operations, the outposts, and the weapons factories and things like that. Wow, and we've still got so much to learn. It's almost as if we haven't learned anything, isn't it?
Yeah, and when we don't know the future and we can't learn from the future, we can learn from the past because past is prologue. And with that being said, I want to take a step back into history to give us a blueprint as to how we can confront the situation as a global
Before
community.
it happens again, like history repeats itself every now and then.
Yes. Yeah, no, that certainly. So most people know that World War II officially began in September 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. However, what some people may not know is that there were a series of successive events that accumulated and that eventually accumulated into this event. So, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, after the Weimar Republic was officially abolished, Nazi Germany created the Luftwaffe, which was the German Air Force that would later be used in battles of World War II, in 1933. In 1935, Nazi Germany reintroduced conscription for young men, increasing the size of their military by a lot. In 1936, Nazi Germany invaded and reoccupied the Rhineland. Several years later, Adolf Hitler was eventually able to achieve Anschluss, or the reunification of Germany and Austria, in 1938. Astonishingly, this added 7 million people to the German population and increased the size of its army by 100,000 men. So during this time, European nations addressed this through a policy of appeasement. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and French Prime Minister Edouard Dallier were the chief architects of the infamous Munich Agreement. So in September 1938, Nazi Germany was demanding the secession of the Sudetenland, which was basically the German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia. Instead of directly confronting Nazi Germany, instead of going to war against Nazi Germany for trying to cede such land, Prime Minister Chamberlain and Prime Minister Dallier decided to meet Hitler and Italian leader Benito Mussolini in Munich, Germany. And the entire agreement stated that the Sudetenland would be ceded to Nazi Germany in exchange for Nazi Germany not demanding more territorial requests and more territorial ambitions. Eventually, after the agreement was signed, Prime Minister Chamberlain declared peace for the time, and many people actually hailed it as achievement. Now, there were actually several reasons to support appeasement. The first one was obviously to avoid war. World War I ended only 20 years prior, and many individuals did not want to undergo such a horrible conflict. Another reason for appeasement, specifically, was to basically buy time for France and the United Kingdom to redevelop its military capabilities so that it can confront Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy at a separate date. But one reason that many people don't necessarily, that history overlooks rather, is that many individuals actually sympathize with Nazi Germany. And the reason for this is because, one, they felt that that Nazism was actually a counterweight to the influence of the Soviet communism. And another reason was that they felt that Germany was that the Treaty of Versailles of 1918 was too harsh on Germany. Very briefly, the Treaty of Versailles basically forced Germany to de-arm itself and ceded many German territories, incredibly weakening the state. And this overall bred resentment in Germany, and this coupled with the Great Depression and economic difficulties throughout the 1920s and 1930s eventually led to the rise of Adolf Hitler. So, essentially, the Munich Pact was in some ways developed out of too much empathy. It emboldened and empowered fascist Italy and Nazi Germany to make more territorial requests. So while it delayed war, it certainly did not stop it, as Germany would eventually invade all of Czechoslovakia a few months after the Munich Agreement, and then invade Poland in September 1939. So how does this relate to the present day? What can we learn from the Munich Agreement? The truth is that that aggressors, that foreign malign aggressors cannot be appeased, they cannot be placated. And it is, and of course, and in my personal opinion, I don't believe that we should have a full military intervention in Ukraine or putting boots on the ground. And I also support the harsh economic sanctions against Russia in response to this. And I think the international community has proven that the West and the entire world will not tolerate Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But at the same time, it is very important that we continue to supply military capabilities in the form of Javelin missiles, in the form of military equipment to Ukraine, so Ukrainians can have the ability to ward off Russia. And so in personal life, it is very important to maintain a balance of empathy. Balance is key, and balance is a key to all human interaction. It is the basis of all human interaction and of all human creation. And for this reason, too little empathy is detrimental. Too much empathy in rare circumstances, such as the Munich Agreement, can be equally problematic. So like with everything, it's about compassion, love, and understanding for all things outside of ourselves, our selfish needs, desires, and wants. And it is very important to strike that balance so that we can sustain a positive and productive personal, local, regional, national, and international world. So, Cliff, what are your thoughts? Do you have any comments?
Well, I'm thinking that folks are listening into this and they're saying, who is this James Jett Priutt guy? How old is he? It's amazing. What, you're 16?
Yes, 16.
Just now 16, and you're an author. You've written a very good, popular book about politics, being a young American.
Yes.
And now we're sure, and we're confirmed he is a young conservative American, and he sounds like a guy that'll make a great talk radio show host someday.
I appreciate that, Cliff.
Well, when you see these young people up and coming, and you see what they're doing and hear what they're talking about, I think we're in good hands. Now, you've got a website. Do you do little political chats on your website from time to time, little blogs?
Yes, I'm a founder and and editor-in-chief of a political news website, the GenZPost.com. That is the GenZPost.com.
Like Generation Z?
Yes, Generation Z.
So they THEGENZ Post.
Yes.
.com.
Yes, we cover everything from Supreme Court decisions, economics, international relations, international affairs, and it is the perspective of a member of Generation Z and the future of politics.
Wow, the future of politics. I think we're in good hands as far as the future goes. And folks, you've been listening to a special edition of Careology, The Science of Care, and Roxy Brown's usually our host, and she's had other great guest hosts like like the mysterious MILO. She's been a guest a couple times on the show too, and then she's your mother, right?
Yes, she is. Wow. She's my wonderful mother. I love her very much. And I want to shout out to some people. Thank you, Mom, for definitely coming with me, being my
Camera
sidekick.
3 operation.
Yes.
Operator.
Thank you so much, Roxy. I am so thankful to be a member of CareBag, to be a producer for Careology. Thank you for allowing me to host tonight. I appreciate it. Special shout out to Mrs. Hannah Morris of the Harvard University's Making Caring Common Board. I thank you so much for encouraging me to host this radio show. I am proud to be a member of the board. Thank you to all the members of the board for encouraging this as well. Thank you for offering advice, comments, suggestions. I really appreciate it. And finally, thank you so much, Cliff, for playing along with me. Thank you for everything you do. And
Wow.
It was really fun.
I feel like I'm working with a future superstar. That's kind of a strange feeling for me.
That's awesome, and I'm momager.
Oh, that's right. The manager? You're his
Momager. It's Mom
Momager.
who's the manager.
The
He's got a
momager.
really fledgling career. Jett is also a political consultant to the world's largest financial newspaper, Nikkei Asia, in Japan, as well as being a Pulitzer Prize nominated author. As he said, he's editor-in-chief of the GenZPost.com, and he has another book coming out called The Progressive Conservative, What the Republican Party Must Do to Win Over Generation Z. That book is going to be released in 35,000 bookstores worldwide at the end of the year. Fingers crossed COVID doesn't delay it again.
Right.
And he turns 17 next year. Sorry, next month.
Wow.
Next
Next
month.
month.
Not bad.
So pretty cool. And we're really proud of him, and to think that, you know, every day is a blessing to have with your loved one. So thank you, Jett.
I appreciate that, Mom. Thank you.
All right, you've been listening to Careology, the science of caring, with Roxy Brown out tonight, but she'll be back next week. And hey, stick around. There's more to learn and more to come in the days to come on Careology. This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world, on Google Home, Alexa, and the TuneIn app on your smartphone, even archives on YouTube. It's 7 o'clock.